Good evening. I just wanted to do a brief intro to my latest video. I've decided to do this inside because it is so much quieter. I think you may have noticed in some of my other videos I'm outside, so you get all that extraneous noise. Airplanes, kids screaming, wife calling me, ATVs, motorcycles, etc. So I'm doing this inside. Now, my video is going to be on ghost voltage. Now, I'm talking AC voltage, which if you don't know what you're doing, you can at the very least injure yourself and or burn something down possibly. So in the immortal words of Aunt Bee talking to Andy in one of the shows where he tried to repair something and he couldn't, Andy, just call the man. And that makes perfect sense. As a sidebar, I work at a hospital 5 days a week. I have to wear a mask the entire time I'm there. I'm going to show you a picture of me of what I look like at the end of the week. Now, I don't know whether my face is moving backwards, my ears are moving forward, or whether they're meeting somewhere in between. But when you see this picture, I think you'll agree, I really don't need Botox. Here's the picture. Now that that's over, I just want you to know that I'm talking about ghost voltage, so I'm really not here. So, here is the project at hand, my sister's she shed. And, if you look closely, the Flying Monkeys she shed. If you understand the reference, you are old. If you don't, look it up. Alright, so let's look things over. Let me show you how this progressed. This is a 10 by 20. Let me go around to the side of the house here and I'll show you the ditch that we had to dig in order to run the electrical line. Well, I had to start this over again. Apparently it had insufficient write speed on the card. I don't know why. But here is the 10 by 20 shed that belongs to my sister. It was pre-wired inside, so I'll show you that when I get inside. I wired from her house to the shed about 70 feet. And according to the code here in Durham, North Carolina, I had to use underground feeder. Don't have to use the conduit underground. I do have to use conduit. Anything above ground, that's 1.5 inch conduit there. This is on the other side of her garage. And you say, okay, well, you have to go 24 inches. That's great. But why such a large hole? Well, in order to have this shed, she had to meet a certain code requirement, and that is, in Durham, North Carolina, you have to have X amount of impervious soil. We had to remove 200 square feet of concrete. And it just so happened we rented a small John Deere with a bucket and a backhoe. We had to break that concrete up and put it here in the backyard. So it didn't make sense to rent a trencher and the backhoe. And it's hard to find a trencher that'll go 24 inches deep. Some of them might go 18. But the ones that have tracks, that one went down to 24. And we're going to have a couple of teenagers fill this hole back in. So again, 1.5 inch conduit anywhere it goes above ground. Well, let me show you this. This is something I didn't know about, but codes do change. I'm going to step across the hole here. So here it is. Again, that's underground feeder, 8.3. Goes up here. That is one grounding rod, a few inches under the soil, 2 grounding rods. According to the code, you must have at least 2 grounding rods, a minimum of 6 feet apart. I did this at 8. Now, driving 8-foot grounding rods in this soil here is a bear. We literally had to rent a heavy-duty tool.
and it was about 60 pounds. And jackhammer this stuff in. It took two of us. I had to stand on a ladder while somebody held it and try not to impale myself. Got that in. That is also 6-gauge copper wire for the ground. It's a little crowded in here, but as you could see, this was pre-wired. And here was a panel that already had two, it's a square D panel, already had two breakers. The one on the left is a 20 amp, so that's 12 gauge wire. The one on the right is a 15, which is 14 gauge wire. So what they had done is they had wired in 2 circuits of receptacles on that 20 amp. Now I made a slight modification. The first circuit went down and under, and they had put a receptacle there in the middle of the bench. So what I did is pulled wire back, moved it over here, and put in a ground fault interrupter. That's about 15 bucks. And then I ran it back over here. Okay, so what they did is they used one breaker for 2 separate circuits on the receptacles. The first one I just showed you, and then this one they went up and over and then down way over here and put one receptacle behind the grinder. You might see the orange plug down there. There is a GFI receptacle there also. Anything upstream protects anything downstream. Now, could you have put a GFI breaker in the box? Well, you could have. Those things are pricey. They're about 52 bucks a pop now. And it's not only GFI, it's also arc fault and one other standard. It was cheaper to use 2 15 amp, or I'm sorry, 115 and 120 amp GFI. Okay, so let's talk about how this was wired up originally and what I did. Originally, this was a single pole switch and a single gang box. Power feed came from the actual box over to the left that I showed you, down here and up to 2 boxes and 2 lights above me. I'll show you that in a minute. So there's the original power feed. These are the only 2 things, again, separate circuits. The receptacles are on a 20 amp and this is 15 amp. So this is the only thing that was above us. My sister put in 2 LED style lights. So what I did is I added a 4-gang box because I'm adding a fan, because it's toasty in here, I'm adding a ceiling fan. So switch number 2 over here is going to be to the fan to operate the fan motor. Switch number 3 to the fan but operate the light. That is going to be, or is, 14 3-wire. So I have 1 sheath and 2 conductors. This 4th one is for the future outside light. Now remember, 1 power feed, and I did 4 pigtails. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I provided power off of 1 pigtail here. I then, the line, and then the load above. So everything under here was hot. Here was load. So when I got up to the fan here and started checking voltage, I couldn't remember if did I wire in the red wire or the black wire. So I took my non-contact AC voltage checker and I had a little bit of a mystery. And let me show you. Okay. Alright, so there's one light there, and go over, and there's the fan box in between. There's my wires. That's the 14-3. And then there's the other LED. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go show you that I had 122 volts on the red wire because I had anticipated putting the red wire in switch 2. Everything was off. Just 1 power feed to that red wire. I just happened to check the black wire and I had voltage according to that non-contact voltage regulator. I said, no, wait a minute, that's not right. I didn't tie those together. It's 4 separate feeds. But let me show you. So I'm going to hook up my meter and we're going to read voltage using the meter. Okay, so now that I have my tools working, what I'm going to do is I only have power to 1 wire, and that's the red wire up there. Red wire, black wire, conductors, a white neutral, and a ground. So I'm going to touch the red wire, but I'm going to show you what happened when I just happened to touch the black wire. If I touch the red wire, I got voltage. I should not have voltage to the black wire. But guess what? I do. So, one of the first checks I did, let's go a red wire to ground. I should get about 120 volts. Now remember, this thing's hot, so be careful.
122.1.
Okay? I should not have any voltage on this black wire because it is turned off.
And we're reading 51.9, 49, 50, around 50 volts AC.
Ghost voltage. Get down here. Alright, so I'm going to show you a proof of concept here in a second too. Why would you get 50 volts when this was wired for 120? Well, there's no short. Let's just say that I drove one of the staples in and I nicked one of the wires. Well, that's going to be a full 120 and it's going to short and it's going to trip the breaker. I even went to the box. Here, I touched ground and one bus bar, 120. Ground and the other bus bar, 120. Then I went from the bus bar to bus bar, 240, right? Because I've got 8-3, I've got two conductors. Then I decided, well, let's see what it is from the circuit breaker on. So the screw where you attach the wires from that point on tells me what it is load from that part. So I grounded that screw, you know, hot to ground, 120 volts. So I can't say that's a circuit breaker. But let me show you the proof of concept here. I'm going to get up again. And yes, this is live. Live, or is it Memorex? So here's that proof of concept again. Now remember, everything is off except for that one switch to the red wire. Don't touch the red wire. Now, if I touch this black wire, it supposedly had 50 volts AC. Not milli, not mini, not mini-me. Proof of concept. Nothing. Well, let's ground my cell. Ground wire. Nothing. Neutral wire. Nothing. But if I touch that red wire, I'm the ground. It's going to straighten my hair. All right, so I could go all day on the research and theoretical stuff that I've looked at, and I'm not going to go there. I invite you to do that on your own. But basically, it's because of so many electronic devices today. A lot of this is feedback from a lot of those devices. Actually, one of the first things that crossed my mind was those LED lights. LED lights and their drivers and control boards can create havoc on electrical systems. And so it was easy just to unscrew those two things and see if that eliminated it. Guess what? It did not eliminate it. So that ruled those out. It gets very complicated, very technical. But this is what I found so far. I've heard of this phenomenon. It was somewhere in the deep recesses of my mind, but I'd never come across it. So this time, I came across it. Now, I can finish the project. So here is the finished project. It took me long enough. It is hotter than Hades here in North Carolina, and a thunderstorm is coming. Typical North Carolina weather in the afternoon. All right, so switch one I have over here. That's going to be for the fan. And then a separate switch for the light. And nothing blew up. Again, this is to keep the she shed cool. And then there's the switch for the lighting that was already here. And then I have another switch for the future outdoor light. Main lights, fan motor, fan light. And that's a wrap.